Shalom Aleichem, a good Erev Shabbos. I'm still in the shul, which used to be the home of Harav and Nachum Zefer Levi Greenglass, Zolav Shalom Lechen Levracha, and I'm going to be recording the second shiur of 3 on the Mamer, Basi Legani Tafshin Chav Gimel. I'm sorry, the background is not the nicest, but I'm now sitting in the Weiber shul. I was sitting in the men's shul, and I was interrupted enough times to make me dizzy, so I figure I'll move here. I can still be interrupted plenty here, but let's continue. Rabbi Sai, we're learning Tafshin Chav Gimel, which is based on Perek Yud Gimel. And of course, as I explained to you in my introduction of the last class, this Mamer ends dark. The Mamer of Tafshin Chav Gimel ends dark because the previous Rebbe is explaining Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis. Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis means that godliness extends so low that even the deepest and darkest of places, godliness is present, hispashtos, and godliness is revealed. Gilui, that's the direction. The problem is the hispashtos and the gilui is going to be in the next Perek. So the way this Perek goes is he develops the idea of Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis and concludes with darkness, with concealment, with Halam Vehester, with Choshech. So that's how the Mamer finishes, which is a bit Vimedok Nigishmak, but you have to, not so pleasant. It's a segue into what's going to be next year. But the way the Mamer develops is he starts off by saying that Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis cannot mean Ein Saf and Atzilus. Ein Ze Pel Klal. It's not at all wondrous that there should be Elokus Begilu and Ein Saf and Atzilus, because they're compatible with Elokus. You have to say that it's Elam is Biyah. That's how the last shiur finished. That godliness is revealed in Elam is Ein Sof. That godliness is revealed in Elam Atzilus is no big deal. The big deal is that godliness is revealed in the lower worlds of Bariah, Yetira, and Asiyah. So now the Rebbe is going to talk about Bariah, Yetira, and Asiyah. And in talking about Bariah, Yetira, and Asiyah, he's going to also develop the ideas of Bariah, Yetira, and Asiyah from the higher levels to the lower levels. In other words, he doesn't start out at the bottom of Biyah. He starts out at the top of Biyah, and he gradually works lower and lower. What's the top of Biyah? Neshamis. What's lower than Neshamis? Malach. What's the bottom of Biyah? Elames, especially Elamaz Agashmi V'achumri. And that's what the next 2 shiurim are going to do. Now that we said that Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis cannot mean Atzilus, because that's no big deal, so it has to mean Biyah. So in Biyah itself, he's going from higher to lower, and the higher is Neshamas Yisrael. So you know what? Let's start. Let's read inside, and we'll develop the ideas as we go. There's one point that I need to sort of establish. There's one idea that I have to say Vimizokta as a higoyen, as an introduction, about the difference between the word evorim and the word gufa. Evorim, gufa, and the word levushim. Atzilus is called gufa, and Biyah is called levushim. And after he goes from gufa to levushim, he's going to immediately go to Neshamas Yisrael, which is the dominant topic of this class. And after the Previous Rebbe explains in what we learned earlier in Perek Yud Gimel, that you cannot say that the kavanah is of Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis for Ein Saf and Atzilus, because that's not a pella. And the chidish of Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis is dafkin Biyah. So the Previous Rebbe continues and he says, She'inyan Dein Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis, that the place where it's a pella of hispashtos and gili of Ein Seif low, beyond an end, goes in the lower 3 worlds of Bariah, Yetira, and Asiyah. Lefi, and this is a quote from the Previous Rebbe's Mamer, She'elam is Biyah, the 3 worlds of Bariah, Yetira, and Asiyah. Hareim bechinas mata, they're lower than Elokus. The Kelim, the Atzilus, and Gufa l'nishmasa. The body of the vessels of Atzilus like a body to a soul. Mashen can Biyah bechinas levushim, and Biyah is like garments to a soul. This is called in some places levush ha-meyuchad and levush ha-nifrad. I guess the beginning of this would be Tanya Perek Chav Gimel, where the Alter Rebbe explains what's the difference between the relationship between a body and a soul and a shirt and a body. The body and the soul are so one that you cannot separate the body from the soul. You cannot change your body and trade it in for another one. You can change your shirt. So the body is called the levush harishin, or the levush ha'atzmi for the neshama. And what's outside the body is called levush ha'mischalef for the body. It's a secondary garment. In some place, it's the difference between tzelem and mus. Tzura atzma and tzura mitzura. So guf means the dimension of the body that's so close to the soul that you cannot know where the soul ends and where the body begins. And that's a mashal for Atzilus. It's a mashal for the Evarim, for the limbs. The mitzvahs are like the body of a lakus. What is the significance of comparing the mitzvahs to the body of a lakus? Everybody knows how bottled the body is to the neshama. Outside of the mitzvahs, outside of Atzilus, outside of the body of clothing. And that's B'ri Yitzir and Asi'ah. And these two words, Gufah or Evarim and Levushim, are the key intellectual ideas of what's going to be developed now. And you have to think of it in plain terms. You have a soul, the soul is in a body, and the body is wearing clothes. You're a person, the truth of who you are is your life, is your neshama, not your guf. But in order for your life and your neshama to be in this world, it needs a guf. In order for the guf to traverse the world, where you're not the only human being on the planet, you need to have clothing. So the clothing represents your body, the body represents your soul. And in the Nimshal, Bria represents Atzilus, and Atzilus represents Ein Seif. But the difference in representation is very profound. The way Atzilus represents Ein Seif is very proximate, it's very close. The way Bria represents Atzilus is very remote. Like the difference in the relationship between a body and a soul and a shirt and a body. A shirt you can change, you can throw it away. It's not an absolutely necessary phenomena, but the body is. So Kalim of Atzilus are like a body to a soul to Eid of Atzilus, where the Kali and the Eid are so one, the body and the soul are so one, that even the Kali, even the body is a lakus, like we discussed in the last shir, and you can't change it in. And Bria is like a shirt to a body. So if the neshama is like Ein Seif, the body is representing Ein Seif. That means Atzilus is representing Ein Seif. But the body is representing Ein Seif, is that it's so one with the Ein Seif that it's actually the Ein Seif. Bria is another garment. Bria is a shirt around the body, which is Atzilus, which is around the soul, which is Ein Seif. But the shirt's relationship to the body is far more distant, far less exact, far less precise than the proximity of the body and the soul. And that's going to be the argument. Elam is Biyah are so far away from a lakus that they're not like a gufta lakus. They're like a malbush lakus. That's the vart that Rebbe is trying to present. It says in Pasach Eliyahu, Kam Lebushin Tekin Aslain, the Avish has many garments. And they call Yalbiyah, the garments are not Atzilus. The Atzilus is Gufa. And the garments are Bria, Shem Rak Levush, and they're only garments, Bavad alone, Le'era Keil Atzilus, to the light which comes through the Kalim of Atzilus. So think of it this way: you have an idea, and you put it into words, that would be Gufa. You take the words of those, and put them in alternative words, that would be Levush. So Bia is a Levush, Atzilus is a Guf, and Ein Seif is a Neshama. And the one between Guf and Neshama is absolute. The one between Levush and Guf and Neshama is not so absolute. But then the Rebbe adds even more. Another point. When you speak about the distance between Levushim and Gufa, that means Bia and Atzilus, you have to know the following. Mamer, like it says, and the source of this is Tikunei Zohar, Bina of Atzilus lives in Kisei, which is Elam Bria. The Eim Elo Bechinas Bina, Atzilus Bina of Atzilus lives in Elam Hakisei. Elam Hakisei, the Kisei Yaakov, the Elam Bria. Shit Sfira and Yetsira, the six spheres live in Yetsira. And Ve'efen, Basi, and Ofen, which means the Malachim, they're in the shape of a wheel. Ofanim, they live in Atzilus. Stop. In my humble opinion, right here you have the first nakuda. The word maknן, to live. Bina belongs in Atzilus. And it's transported from its place in Atzilus to give chayas to bria. Midis Zohar belongs in Atzilus and is transported to give chayas to Yetsira. Malchus Ofen is supposed to be in Atzilus and it's transported to give chayas to Yetsira. How? By putting on a shirt. So Bina Makana means Bina is a goof for neshama vein safe. Makana puts on a shirt to live in Elam Bria to give chayas to Elam Bria. Vav Ktsavis Makana Be'elam Yetsira. That means the 6 meters of Atzilus, whose place is in Atzilus. And in Atzilus there are guf neshama, there are guf evadim lemalka. When it goes into Elam Yetsira, it puts on a shirt of Elam Yetsira to give chayas to Elam Yetsira. And Ofen, which belongs in Malchus of Atzilus, and in Atzilus it's like a guf, it's like evadim, comes at Asiyah with the levush to chayas Elam Asiyah. So Mekanen, the word that the Bina, Zoh, and Malchus of Atzilus are living in Bria, Yetsira, and Asiyah means it takes on a garment to be in the lower worlds. So to me, this is the end of the point, right here. Mekanana, Bria living in Yetsira, Bina living in Bria, and Vav Ktsav is living in Yetsira, and Ofen living in Asiyah is already a secondary idea. They belong in Atzilus, and they're transferred with a shirt, with a secondary covering, with a garment which is outside, to give chayas to the lower 3 worlds. And that's enough. Right there you explained why Atzilus is called Gufa, and Bria is called Levush. Guf means a garment that's absolutely connected to the soul, it's irreplaceable and inexchangeable. And Levusha means a garment which is replaceable and is absolutely exchangeable because it's far more removed from the Guf and the Neshama than the Guf is from the Neshama. But now the Rebbe adds a second point, and that's how I want to teach it. I want to teach it as 2 points. That we said in these first 5 lines is already an inyan. Mekanana means Levush Leguf. But now we add something else. V'yesh leiman. I want to add something else as the Heilig Rebbe. Kavanose, the intent of the Friedrich Rebbe, quoting this Tikkun Zeir, that Eimad Mekanana Bebria Vav Ktsav B'Yisif Basiya. She'inyin Zeh, this idea, She'elam is behind Levushim Leir Atzilus, that the 3 worlds of Bria, Yetsir, and Asiyah receive godliness from Atzilus as a Levush for Atzilus, as opposed to as the Guf of Atzilus. But all 3 worlds, both Bria and Yetzira and Asiyah, relate directly to Atzilus. And here's his language. And it's not in such a way. You can say that Bria is a garment for Atzilus, and Yetzira is a levush lebria, and Yetzira is not getting from Atzilus, Yetzira is getting from Bria. V'asiyah levush Yetzira, and Asiyah is not getting from Atzilus, getting from Yetzira. You could say that. So you could say that Atzilus is levushed in Bria, Bria is levushed in Yetzira, Yetzira is levushed in Asiyah. So Asiyah has nothing to do with Atzilus. So the Rebbe says, no. Atzilus is levushed in Bria through Ema, Atzilus is levushed in Yetzira through Vav Ktsavis, and Atzilus is levushed in Asiyah through Ofen. And as a result of this, you have a full idea of Ein Seif Lamata Ein Tachlis. And he explained, if it was true that Atzilus is levushed in Bria, and Bria is levushed in Yetzira, and Yetzira is levushed in Asiyah, Oz yesh makam, you could say, Masbek HaShevach, that it's sufficient to praise Ein Seif Lamata Ein Tachlis, B'negelis, Pachas V'gil, B'el Bria Levad, coming into Bria is already Lamata Ein Tachlis, because Yetzira is not getting from Atzilus, she is getting from Bria. Bria is already not a Lakus. Sharigam Zeudav Pella, that Bria is already a Pella, and Yetzira is not the same Pella. And Asiyah is not the same Pella, because Yetzira is only getting from Bria, and Asiyah is only getting from Yetzira. So therefore the Rebbe says it's not that way. It's not that Atzilus becomes levushed in Bria, and Bria becomes levushed in Yetzira, and Yetzira becomes levushed in Asiyah, in which case Ein Seif ends in Bria, Ella, but rather, in Lavushin, who the way the levushin of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah act as secondary garments to the Guf of Atzilus. It's be'efin in such a fashion, Shekol Gimel Elam is beyond Nechshavim, all 3 worlds of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah are considered like one big world in relationship with Atzilus. Kanal, as we discussed in the previous year, when we discussed Atzilus, in explaining the Zeh class Amen Israel Kuchabricha, which is also the Pasuk Tachtim Shneim Shlishim, Shem Elam is Elam in Taf, it's the world higher than Atzilus. Elam Atzilus in the world of Atzilus itself. Elam is beyond all 3 worlds. In other words, She'elam is beyond Nechshav Elam Echad, all 3 worlds. Bria, Yetzira, Asiyah are all considered one world. In other words, here's the key line: Shekulam beyachad hem levushim le'elam Atzilus. The 3 of them together are the garments of Atzilus. What do you gain from that? That Atzilus, which is Ein Seif, is in Asiyah, not only in Bria. And the Ein Seif Lamata Ein Tachlis is till Asiyah, not just till Bria. And the Rabbi brings proof in the Mamer from the Tikkun is the Eimer law Bina Atzilus Makana B'Kasel Mabria. Shitsfin and Yetsira, Ofen Basi, which means it's not in the kind of way. Atzilus goes into Bria. And from that point forward, there's no longer Atzilus, and there's Slavish El Mabria Belam Yetsira, so it's going into Yetsira only Bria. And then Yetsira Basio, if you would say it that way, then the end of Ein Seif Mata then Tachas would only be Bria, because in Yetsira there's only the Gili of Bria, not the Gili of Ein Seif. But rather, I'm 6 lines from the end of the paragraph. Shakol has Atzilus, all the spheres of Atzilus. Bina zo malchus, shit sphere malchus Ofen is K malchus. It's one composite. That I'm Islapshin bechol gimel el b'yad revealed in all 3 worlds. Bria, Yetzira and Asiyah, and the way this Lapshus is that Bina is an Elma Bria, Zo is an Elma Yetzira, and Malchus an Elma Atzilus in Asiyah. Bizem move on, which leads to the following conclusion: Sha'in and they didn't say lamata din tachas the notion that didn't say extends so low that it comes even to the worlds that are not godliness. Is koi, it refers not just to Elam Abriya, but kol gimel Elam Azbiya, all 3 worlds, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah, because kulam yachad, the collection of worlds, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah, are together Yavushim Elam Atzilus. So the Rebbe just said 2 points in this Perek, this paragraph, this Perek. Number 1, that Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah is a Lavush for Atzilus, as represented by the word Mekanana. And number 2, that Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah all have Atzilus directly in them. It's not that Atzilus is directly in Bria, and that in Yetzira you only have Bina directly, but rather in Yetzira you have also Atzilus directly, and in Asiyah you also have Atzilus directly. So Ein Seif, which includes Atzilus, is Lamata Adein Tachlis till Asiyah. And that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe means by quoting this Tikkun Ezeh. By quoting this Tikkun Ezeh, he's proving that the end of Ein Seif is not only in Bria, which would also be considered Lamata Adein Tachlis, but it's all the way till Asiyah. And that's the end of a point. That's the end of a point that Atzilus is called Guf, and Biyah is called Levushim, and the Levushim carry Ein Seif throughout Biyah until Asiyah. Now goes one more point, and this is the Perek Dalet. And the additional point that we're going to be now learning is about the place of Neshamas Yisrael in all of this. And the Rebbe says, the Mamer continues regarding the idea that Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah are all garments for Atzilus. He says, quote, the Minayu from all of these garments in Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah, Parch and Nishmas, and the Bnei Nosha, souls fly for the sons of man, for human beings, Shema Neshamas, which are the Neshamas. In other words, that Neshamas predominate in Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah. And because Neshamas predominate in Bria, Yetzira, and Asiyah, Neshamas are part of Lamata Adein Tachlis. Now, I'm terrible at keeping secrets, so I won't keep a secret. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen. The Rebbe is going to say that Neshamas come from Atzilus, but really very, very few of them are Neshamas of Atzilus. The vast majority of Neshamas are Neshamas de Biyah. And because the vast majority of Neshamas are Neshamas de Biyah, the vast majority of Neshamas are connected to these Levushim, and the vast majority of Neshamas are connected to the idea of Ein Seif Lamata Adein Tachlis. That Lamata Adein Tachlis includes bringing Ein Seif to Neshamas Yisrael, based on the fact that Rubam Kakulam of Neshamas Yisrael are only in Biyah and not in Atzilus. And that's what this Perek is going to say. He's going to explain the importance of Neshamas, and he's going to explain that Neshamas are also Nifradim. Souls are also separate. And because souls are also separate, they are included in the idea of Lamata Adein Tachlis. By the way, in the previous Shir, when you had the 2 Eifanim of the Mikdash Melech and the Ramaz in interpreting the Baal Shem Tov, that according to the Mikdash Melech, Neshamas are Bria, and according to the Ramaz, Neshamas are Atzilus. So the way it would play out now is the Ramaz's version, Neshamas are Atzilus, is talking about the biggest Neshamas. And the Mikdash Melech version, the Neshamas are Bria, means most Neshamas. So even though in the previous Shir we were leaning towards the Ramaz against the Mikdash Melech, in this Shir we're going to be leaning to the Mikdash Melech against the Ramaz, that most Neshamas are in Bria. In other words, if you learn today's Shir, this Shir, you could go back to the previous Shir to say that the Machlokes between the Mikdash Melech and the Ramaz, in explaining that Neshamas of the middle Madrege has to do with which Neshamas. Neshamas Klolius are Atzilus, like it says in Ramaz, and the Neshamas Bechlal are only Bria, like it says in the Mikdash Melech. But that's just titillation, just fun. Says the Rebbe, to explain what's the continuity. That we explain Atzilus, and we call Atzilus Guf, and then we explain Bria, and we call Bria Levush, and we insist that all three worlds are all Levush of Atzilus, and then we start to move on to Neshamas. And the Rebbe says, Kiv, because Hemshech HaHilula, since the point of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Hemshech HaHilula is about Avoida, Medu B'Rei, this Neshamas Yisrael is discussed in Yiddish and Neshamas. And very importantly and significantly and centrally, Avedasam and their work. To bring godliness into the lower worlds. The Shechina was originally here, and the Shechina left, and now we have to make a permanent home to keep him here. As the Pasuk says, that Elam is at this world. It's the lowest step. There's nothing lower than it. It's explained in Tanya the language of the lowest steps and the lowest things. Accordingly, if the avoid of Yid makes the dira b'tachtonim, you need to say that all of the things of the lower worlds, where the tachtenim, the Elokus is being brought b'tachtenim, yeshnim gam etel b'nei Yisrael, exist by Yid, meaning to say Yid have to descend that low. So although the Rebbe is going to say that there's neshamas of Atzilus, but most neshamas are b'yah, and that's it's a chassaron in the madrega of the neshama, but it's a maila in the neshama's ability to fulfill the purpose of making this world a dirale is barach b'tachtenim. Which is why he explains, after he explains that Atzilus is gufah, and all three elements of Biyah are levush la'atzilus. He says neshamas come from those levushim because neshamas have to bring the godliness into those worlds. The garments of Biyah, which are secondary and covering over the guf of Atzilus, shayach neshamas Yisrael, is connected to the Jewish soul. The garments of Biyah says that souls fly from the garments of Bria, Yetsira, and Asiyah to people which is neshamas. So that we understand that most neshames are part of the למטה עדיין תכלית, so that the godliness could be brought to them, number one, and that they should bring godliness to the tachtin through the v'ashachanti b'soicham avoida. And he continues and he says, and the previous Rebbe continues and he says that the Reva neshames heim neshames abiyah, only the majority of souls are neshames abiyah. But teira l'reif tedaber, I wrote this on the margin. It's enough, right? The fact that there's neshamas also of Atzilus is a minority, and that would be consistent with the sheet of the Ramaz that neshamas are in Atzilus. Most neshamas are in Bria, which is consistent with the sheet of the Mikdash Melech. And now that's preferred. It's preferred because the neshamas of Biyah are the ones who are able to bring together the Ein Seif, Lamata Adein Tachlis, and its permanence through V'aso Li Mikdash. As opposed to V'rachad B'dara one in every generation, B'dara Sedeshem in the earlier generations. Heim neshamas da Atzilus, they're souls of Atzilus. Avorev and neshamas, the vast majority of souls and neshamas the biyah, and he's seeing this as a maile. The levush biyah is tachn shedach lamata imenu. It's lamata adin tachlis, and the neshamas Yisrael are in that madrege because they facilitate the bringing of Ein Seif to the lamata adin tachlis. Va'inyin bazeh, and the Rebbe explains it. It says in L'Kutei Torah. And the Rebbe is going to speak about the fact that we have higher neshamas. And by the way, at the very bottom of this page, you're going to have oisius of the Rebbe, our Rebbe, who is explaining the words of the Frierdiker Rebbe in the previous paragraph. That the rak chad bedora b'deiras harishenim. It's two limitations. Only one in the generation, the earlier generations, are neshamas of Atzilus. If you look at the bottom of this page, the Rebbe says, second line from the bottom, rak chad bedora ha'nechad she'ol of eimid kol ader, the one on which the whole generation stands. The Rebbe Rayat says Chad Bedara B'Deira Sereshenim, which is mashma that even Deira Sacharenim you don't have such a Chad Bedara. And the Rebbe says no. Chad B'Deira in every generation has a neshama like B'Deira Sereshenim. It's Chad She'ol of Eimet Kol Adeh. The Rebbe really is almost changing the pshat of what the Frierdiker Rebbe says. So the Rebbe is now going to talk to us Ashtika Kabbalah about neshamas of Atzilus and neshamas of Biyah, and the conclusion is going to be a simple one. Neshamas of Atzilus may be very important, but neshamas of Biyah are far more numerous, and they feed a noise the kavana. And since they're the majority, they're consistent with lebushin tikinas lein Biyah, the benayim parchan the shmas and the obn that bring himself lamata adein tachlis. So Yidden are a part of lamata adein tachlis. They're not the lower end of the Lamata and Tachas. Lower end Lamata and Tachas is going to be Pare, which we will see in the next year. But at the beginning of the low end, they're separate from Elikus. The Pshat is Kvish Mavai, Rabbeinu Zach Bechad Kutateda, Shenishmas, Meisha Neshama, Meisha Rabbeinu Shosham Atzmas, Chachmei Law, Meisha Neshama is Madeg of Chachmei Law on the level of Etzim. In other words, Shel Makarat Teda, Meisha Rabbeinu is higher than Teda, he's the source for Teda. High, Lamayla Teda, Meisha is higher than Teda, because Teda in Chachmas, the Teda is called Neva, Chachma Shalmai, what falls from Chachma Shalmai. Kimayim Razal, it says, in the Medrish Neva, Chachma Shalmai Teda. And Meisha Rabbeinu was higher than the Chachmas HaTeira. Umishum Zeh Nitne Teira Yadid after Meisha Rabbeinu is the one who's there to give the Teira. So Meisha Rabbeinu is so high that he's higher than the Teira, and he's a medium to deliver the Teira to us. But because he himself is higher than the Teira, and which is why he's able to give the Teira to us, L'cheinemar by Meisha Rabbeinu it says, Kvad Peh V'Kvad Loshen. He has a heavy mouth and he has a heavy tongue. So it says, Zeyad Kvad Peh, the Gabi Erais and the Teira Shabal Peh. The Teira of Peh, Meisha has a hard time speaking. Kvad Loshen, the Gabi Teira Shabal Meisha has a hard time speaking, even the Gabi Teira Shabal Meisha has a hard time repeating Divrei Teira. But not because of a chasarin, but because of a maila. Shaloi hoya yochal hash, but he was not able to lower himself. Lias nimshech amenu at Teira, to bring through him the Teira, which is the badreg of Neilas Chacham. So Meisha is higher than Teira. And basically, the Mamer Teira in Shmeis, Misa and Pella Adam, we're trying to get parish. Hale anechi avaya, and you have this in the bottom of Lech Lecha also in Teira. Hashem has to give Meisha even higher aliyah, anoichi, that Hashem should bring the Teira down to us. But the point of this shtickele, as relates to this Maimir, that there are souls that are above the Teira, namely Meisha Rabbeinu. Mamshich Sham, and the Frierdiker Rebbe says further, it says Alter Rebbe says further, Shagam Shezeu Bechinas Meisha. So far we talked only about the person Meisha Rabbeinu. Ach Mekein Yesh Gamken Neshamas Geveyes Me'ed Shesh Behem Bechinas Meisha Rabbeinu. There are other Neshamas that also have the Ma'ila of Meisha Rabbeinu. And he brings a Gemara, V'zeo Sh'amar Rab Safra L'Rov, as Rab Safra told Rava, Meisha Shaper Ka'amrit V'chol. Meisha speaks emes. Now I didn't look up the Gemara because I don't have a Gemara. But L'chei Rab Shat Meisha Shaper Ka'amrit, that is calling Rava Meisha. But I don't know. But the point is, Meisha is not the only one. The Shamas of Atzilus are more than one. And the Shamas of Atzilus cannot be called Lebushin, the Minaya Parch and the Shmas and Livnei Nasha. Shamas of Atzilus are above they're above Lamata Dein Tachlis. They're part of Gufä, they're part of Atzilus. So they're very holy and very high and very important, but they're very few. And they're not a part of Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis. So the Rabbi continues and he says, V'hain Neshamas, those are the souls that are called Acham V'reim Lamokim, brothers in French Telekus, which is Zund Atzilus. Since they come from Yichadava, Chochma Bina Atzilus, so they're born, right? Chochma Bina is a Zachar and a Keva. And Zohar Malchus is a Ben and a Bas. So if you're from Chochma and Bina, you're the sons and the daughters, but you're in Atzilus. They're brothers of Atzilus Zoh, which are also the Mailam and Teira. Now before he said that Teira was Nevis Chochma, and now he's saying that not only is Meisha Rabbeinu, who's Etzem of Chochma Law, higher than Nevis Chochma, but the Neshamas of Zun are also higher than Nevis Chochma. And I'm not sure exactly how. However, these Neshamas of Atzilus, Meisha Rabbeinu, and Meisha Shaper Ka'amrit, the Neshamas of Atzilus, that are Achav Reim Lazah, they're the exception. The rule is HaNeshamas and Hamshachim is Zivig Zu and Atzilus. Most Neshamas don't come from Zivig Avah, which means they're born to be the children of Chochma Bina, which is Zun Atzilus, but they're the Yichud Zun. So Zun are their father and mother. So they're born in Elam Bariya. Because Zun is the lower half of Atzilus, it's the father and mother of the lower half of Atzilus. So they're born in Elam Bariya. And the way they're born in Elam Bariya, they're the Kuth Shenas and Nivra, they're the Bechinas Lebushin, and Parch and Lishmas and Livnei Nasha that I explained before. Even though it says in other places, that even from Zun Atzilus. Even the lower half of Atzilus also produces very lofty neshamas that are considered and are called Hanikroim neshamas d'Atzilus mamish, also called neshamas d'Atzilus mamish. So the Rebbe says it doesn't true. He doesn't say it isn't true. He simply says that the neshamas of Atzilus that come from Zun are far, far lower, incomparably lower than the neshamas d'Atzilus that come from Avah. Since they're born from Zivig Zun, even though they're born in such a way that they retain their Atzilus identity, they come from Man, not from Ban. They're like one point compared to what is normally drawn from Chochma Bina to Zun. So these neshamas, even the way they are in Atzilus, are much lower. Even though they're in Atzilus. And these neshamas are lower than Teda. And the Rebbe says, Teda is the essence of Chabad of Zun. In other words, it's from Nevel's Chachma Shalomar. Then it comes down to be Etzem Chabad of Zun, Atzilus Mamish. And therefore, Teda is higher than the neshamas of Zun that are born to be grace and neshamas in Atzilus. So before he said that Teda, Moshe Rabbeinu is higher than Teda, he further said that neshamas that are born as Acham Bereim are also higher than Teda. On the other hand, the neshamas of Zun, even the neshamas Hagavayas, even though the neshamas Hagavayas are lower than Teda. But he continues and he says, so you have Azoy, you have Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the neshamas that are like Moshe Rabbeinu, Acham Bereim, LaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the neshamas that are lower than Moshe Rabbeinu's Madrega, that they're Kam and Atzilus. And then you have the neshamas that are in Biyah, and these are most neshamas. Says the Rebbe, how much more so? And this is the point of this whole page, not to speak about the mile of the neshamas of Atzilus, but rather to speak about the mile of the lower neshamas. Kol sha'ar neshamas, all the remaining neshamas, which are neshamas the Biyah, Mamer, to neshamas of the three worlds. Briya, Yetsira, Asi'ha, Bavada, it's certain, Shem Lamata, and Teda, that's certainly lower than Teda. So the Shom is like Moshe Rabbeinu, the Shom is like Achavereim Lezo, and the Shom is even that come from Yichud Zun, but the way they are in Atzilus, they're very high neshamas, but the vast majority of neshamas are in Biyah, and they're much lower. Valzeh Omru, and on these lower neshamas we say Yisrael is Gashron Be'erais. Right, we all know the Zayir. That last Kishin is Gashron Davada, there were three knots. Yidden are connected to Teda. Teda is connected to the Eibishter. And then there's another connection of Eibishter to Yidden directly. So we say that there's two levels. There's a higher level where Yid connects the Teda to the Eibishter, and there's a lower level where Teda connects the Yid to the Eibishter. For most Jews, Teda connects the Yid to the Eibishter. For the neshamas of Atzilus, they connect Teda to the Eibishter. So Valzeh, on the vast majority of neshamas, there we say Yisrael is Gashron Be'erais, Yid needs Teda to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The idea the Yiddish neshama by itself is alakus. And higher than Teda, and does need Teda to connect to Hashem, is true by Moshe Rabbeinu. But not by most neshamas. Most neshamas need the Teda. So Yisrael is Gashron Be'erais speaks about neshamas in Biyah, that because of their conditioning they're lower than Teda, and because of their conditioning they need Teda to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is most neshamas. But the organ kamash mavar ba maim de pshat na maim de reiv and neshamas de Biyah, both souls of neshamas de Biyah, because most souls come from the lavush mavel bariya. Most souls are so low that they need to connect them to the Eibishter, and accordingly most souls are involved in the process of ein safe lamata adein tachas, make a caliph ain't safe to rest here, and when ein safe rests here he's resting on them. They're the lamata adein tachas on which ein safe is resting. Only one in each generation, and in the earlier generations, and by them you cannot say lebushin tekinas lei, they're above it. 3 lines on the bottom of page Tzadik Beis, especially in our generations. This fact that only rare neshamas are in the Madrega of Atzilus, and the vast majority of neshamas which are in the Elmas Biyah are connected to Levushim and needed to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bavada, it's certain that Rakchad Bedar, only one person in each generation is Madrega of Atzilus, and that one person with Madrega of Atzilus cannot be called Levushim with Tchinas Lein, the Menai Parch and the Bnei Noshe. That one neshama cannot be Yisrael's Gashron Be'erais. Fakert David Hayim Mekachem Teda Shema HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're higher than the Teda, but that's only a Chad Bedar. The vast majority of us are in the lower Madrega, and regarding most of us, we say Levushim Tekinas Lei, and most of us you could say Ein Seif Lamata Adein Tachas. And he explains it in the Rebbe. These few lines are our Rebbe now speaking with all of his passion about his kashas. Chad Sha'olav Eimit Kol Aded. Chad B'dara means the one on which the whole generation stands. Moshe B'deda, Moshe in his generation, there was Shakal Keneged Shisha B'nei Yisrael, it was equal to all 600,000 Jews. And he brings a raya from a pasuk, which is cited in the Paddis, and I find it interesting. He doesn't bring the pasuk Sheish Meis Elef Ragli Amash Anechi B'Kibu, which is brought so many times. He brings the pasuk Anechi Reitis Ama Zevim Anechi L'Tiu Ki Seimen Alai. So Moshe is complaining why the Eibush is making him carry him. So it says in Paddis on this pasuk that Moshe was supposed to carry Yidden because he is like a Yedik, he's like a nursemaid. The reason is Shahayu Kula Bei Shishim Ibn Neshamas in measures included 600,000 souls. Shem Klaus with the Jewish people collectively, and which is why there's a taina that Moshe Rabbeinu has to look after all the Jewish people. So it's interesting and unusual pasuk which he cites, but the point of this pasuk, that neshamas who are in the madrega of the neshama klaus are taka response for the whole generation, because they're the madrega of Atzilus. So the generation see Israel called Nasi v'Nasi b'Dei. Each Rebbe in his generation ad Nasi that Lefidi Rebbe the Rebbe Nasi Adar. Our Rebbe the Rebbe soll gesund sein, that they're this neshama that's makasha yidens the meibishten, where you cannot say lebushin the kinas lane, but rather gufä. There was a yid named Rabbi Yankov Landau, who was the Rav of Bnei Brak for many, many years, and he was succeeded by his son, who is now succeeded by his son's son. Harav Yankov Landau was a Tomim and very close to the Rebbe Rashab, very close to the Rebbe Rashab. Ad kedei kach that mezak that he wasn't so makutsha to Friedrich Rebbe and the Rebbe. He would write to the Rebbe El Kvei Kedushas, he wouldn't write Admur. The Rebbe asked him to send Rishimis, to write his zachrenis of his relationship with the Rebbe Rashab, which he did. And we used to have it in Ksav Yad, which I threw in Shemes and I regret. It's now printed in the back of the first krach of Shmuz V'Sipurim from Father Khan. Ichke Gansberg, Alav Shalom, when he reprinted his father's Sfarim, put it in the back. So one of the stories was, he was very close to the Rebbe Rashab, that there was a conversation about Neshamas Atzilus. So the Rebbe Rashab said to him, Hein des Anishin Nishdog Ken Neshamas Atzilus. Now there are no Neshamas of Atzilus. Now Rabbi Yankov Landau was such a makusher, that by him was a davar achi posho that the Rebbe Rashab was a Neshama of Atzilus. So he needed to be moiche, he needed to protest. He said, Rebbe, you're wrong, there are Neshamas of Atzilus. But L'idach, how could he be moiche against the Rebbe? So he said to the Rebbe Rashab, Aber Rebbe heinz an an echt on Neshama Atzilus. The Rebbe said there are no more Neshamas Atzilus. But the Rebbe, today there are also Neshamas of Atzilus. So I think the Rebbe Rashab smiled, and he said to him, in Neshamas Atzilus and in Dom Madreges, there's different levels in Neshamas of Atzilus. That was the end of the story. That Shabbos, that Friday night, there was a Su'udah, and there was a minyan, and the Rebbe Rashab gave Yankov Landau to be Mevarech B'Chsamazon. And Rabbi Yankov Landau said he was a Bocher. And the Rebbe Rashab never gave him to Mevarech B'Chsamazon, never. He didn't always do it himself, but he never gave it to Yankel. Mitamal, the Rebbe says to give Yankov Landau the kos, to lead the benching, and to say Elokeinu. So Yankov Landau said, I understood that this was the Rebbe's Yasher Koyach. The Rebbe was saying thank you to me for saying that Rebbe heinz an eich don Neshamas Atzilus. So the Friedrich Rebbe says, Chad bedar b'deidas rishenim. And our Rebbe says, Aber Rebbe heinz an eich don Neshamas Atzilus. Echad she'olov emet kol ader kash yisa emet es hayenik. And just for fun, let's read it again. This is true also, but the expansion and radiation of Meshach in every generation, which is Nesiya Yisrael, the Nasi Shavi Yisrael, the Reish B'nei Yisrael, the Tzusah Yankiv Avinu, look at us and Kilas Yankiv, Kol Nasi v'Nasi B'Deiri, every Rebbe in his generation, Adam Sidar until the Rebbe Zalgazunz, and our Rebbe, who is a Neshama of Atzilus, Achem V'Reim Lezah, and Chad all of Emet Kol Ader. So those Neshamas are not in the Madrega where you could say Yisrael Atzilus B'Raisa, they're higher than Eraisa. Those Neshamas cannot be called Lebushin Tekinas Lein. My Parchan Neshmas Neshama, because they're not in the Madrega of Levushim, they're in the Madrega of Gufä. But says the Rebbe, Avol, and here's the point of this Mamer. Kol HaNeshamas Shebedei, all the remaining Neshamas of the generation are Neshamas B'Riah. Which means the vast majority of souls are in the Madrega of separation from Elokus. Maybe they're Shedish as Elokus, but the way they're born in Elam HaBriah, they're separate. And this is what the Lashon of the Zohar is, Levushin Tekinas Lein. Bria Tzilus is Levushin for Atzilus. Not that Bria is a Levush for Atzilus, and Yetzira is a Levush for Bria, and Asiyah is a Levush for Yetzira, but all three worlds, Bria, Yetzira, Asiyah, are Levush for Atzilus, and therefore Atzilus is found even in Asiyah. Ein Seif Lamata Adein Tachlis, and Menayah Parchan Nishmas L'Neinush. And there's a source of Neshamas Yisrael and B'Riah, because Neshamas Yisrael are a part of Tachten. Most Neshamas Yisrael. Neshamas Yisrael are a part of Lamata Adein Tachlis. So this is the beginning of the Lamata Adein Tachlis, right? We said that Ein Seif Lamata Adein Tachlis cannot be Atzilus and Ein Seif. It has to be Bria, Yetzira, Asiyah. And the beginning, the highest idea in Bariah, Yetira, Asiyah, is neshamas. Not the neshamas of Atzilus. Chad, she'ol of Eimet kol adeir, but the rest of neshamas. But as far as in Seif Lamata Adein Tachlis goes, neshamas are the highest in you. In other words, neshamas, there's such a thing in Seif Lamata Adein Tachlis, but there's a lot of levels in Lamata Adein Tachlis. The highest of the levels of Lamata Adein Tachlis is neshamas Yisrael lebushin tekinas lein minayin parchin nishmas nebdei. And therefore he continues and he says, the Rebbe says, Elo. However, even though we're saying that most neshamas, as opposed to a few neshamas, are b'yah, they're part of separation, and therefore they're part of lamata adein tachlis, where ain't safe as lamata adein tachlis, but in Bariah Yetira itself, hey, hine neshamas, and pnimiyim, neshamas of the inner dimension, malachim chitzeniim, and the malachim are secondary dimension. And Elamis are chitzenis, the chitzenis. The Elamis are secondary, Sheba secondary. And the way it says in Tanya, Malachim, the Shamas are from Machshava, and Malachim are from Dibur. And Elamis are from Chitzenis Dibur. So in Biyah Gufa, in Tachten Gufa, in Lamata Tachas itself, they're the highest Madrig. But the meaning of this is, any movement again is that. Why does the Rebbe have to add this? That neshamas are the pnimius, and the malachim are the chitzenius, and the elmas are chitzenius of chitzenius. All of them are part of tachtein. Dinekon the kudas techen a Mamer, who the point of everything is that the tachtein is the one who brings ein seif lamato. Sha'atachlis, who the purpose is leishtamish b'ha'etzeh, to use the treasure, which is going to give us that the soul should be able to fulfill its mission in this world. To make from this world from and from sheker. And the question can be asked, if the purpose is to take the Yetira Elyon and to make it dira b'tachteinim arei neshamas him b'yayim rak levushim. Neshamas in this world are only levush. Moreover, they're nefradim. So how could it be that they should be the ones to use the Yetira Elyon in the lower worlds? Makom still. Davka yadam, only through them nasis ha'aveda, the work is complete of asul lemikdash v'shan debetechem. The shal is how. And he explains the explanation for how the neshamas that are part of tachteinim could be the ones that can bring delakus to tachteinim. Shebechol elam ve'elam, because in these three worlds themselves, neshamas ain't pnimium, the neshamas are the inner dimension, and the elam is chitzenius, the chitzenius. V'lachein haneshamas, which is why the souls that are pnimium, payil amili hashlichus, can actualize the fulfillment of the mission in the elam which are chitzenius of chitzenius, to bring alakus to the chitzenius shebechitzenius be'emtoyes hamalachim alachin shluchim shebechitzenius, to the intermediacy of the malachim. And I'm going to dare suggest that the Rebbe is trying to be merames the other side of this coin. That on the one hand we're saying the shamas are nivraim and nifradim, but on the other hand they're lakus shenasa nivra. And perhaps that's the diuk of pnimium, meaning even though they're in biyah and they're separate and they're iskashroim be'raisa, they're connected to shamas through Torah and they're part of ein seif lamata adein tachlis, but they have the koyach to bring ein seif to tachten, because inside of them there is also a lakus, and they do it through the malach. So neshamas are the beginning of ein seif lamata adein tachlis, but neshamas are the pnimius of lamata adein tachlis, so they're able to facilitate the realization of ein seif lamata adein tachlis, and they use the malachim in order to accomplish this. That seems to be the way you understand it. So in the previous shtikela he explained how the neshamas are separate and low, and in this shtikela he's explained that neshamas are actually pnimius, which means really like a lakus. And that's why they're able to bring a lakus to what is separate and low. And they use the malachim to help them. So now the Rebbe is explaining what does it mean that neshamas use malachim to help them. You've on the explanation of the idea that neshamas Yisrael, even though they're nifrad, but because they're pnimium, they're the ones who bring in seif lamata adein tachlis, and they use the malachim to help them. A potatoes that have a magid. You see, here's a tater of the magid. So the magid was mentioned before on page test, but over there was biketater sabal shemtiv. This is the Teres HaMagid. When it says in the Chazal, which is a Gemara, Ein HaMalachim Eim Dim Shira, Malachim cannot sing, Achi Yisrael Eim Dim Shira, the Yidden sing first. As the pasuk says, Beron Yachad Keich Ve'Beker, the stars of morning sing together. And then it says, Vayiriu B'nei Elokim, the sons of God sing. So Vayiriu B'nei Elokim goes on Malachim, and Beron Yachad Keich Ve'Beker goes on the Shamas. By the way, I saw it at the Sefer Haragachavi. At the Haragachavi was very careful to daven very early. And somebody asked him why, so he said, because it says, Beron Yachad Keich Ve'Beker Vayiriu B'nei Elokim, Ich will nicht verhalten the Malachim. The Malachim can't sing until Yidden sings, so he davened very early. And the question becomes now, why do the Malachim have to wait? Why can't Malachim not sing until Yidden sing first? And the answer is because Yidden are the shadish of everything. And the Yidden being the shadish of everything means they're not just the highest level in Nifrad, they're the Elokus in Nifrad, they're the Elokus in creation. So by calling Yidden Pnimiyim, we're saying that even though superficially on the outside they're levushim and they're separate and they need the Teda, but by Pnimiyas they're the Elokus itself. And that's what he's going to explain now. The Teda, we all know. The Jewish people entered Hashem's thought, and therefore Tchilli Baras to be the first thing to create it, because first Hashem creates through thought, and then Hashem creates the rest of the world through speech. Now, B'Pashtus, Yisrael Ol Machshava means that Yidna Machshava, which is Pnimiyas HaMalchus, and then Malachim, and Elam Esach Yitzenias HaMalchus. But if you look at the Mamer, you have it in Samach Vav, you have it in the word of Mamer Revelation in Zayin. Maybe it's Aseh Lechachar B'Tzurim. Yisrael Ol Machshava means B'chinas Al Yeinish HaB'Machshava. There's Machshava in every world. Higher and higher and higher till Lefnei Atzilus, till Atzmus Hus. And in each place Yisrael Ol B'Machshava. So I'm thinking that although Machshava means thought as opposed to speech, Machshava means much more than thought. It means any kind of garment, till the very, very first garment. And Machshava, the very, very first garment, Yisrael Machshava, is the basis for everything that follows. In Machshava alone, you already have Yashkol Arav Bezeis, is all 22 letters, the 5 utterances, the 5 sources of sound. Umisha, Mishadish, Kal HaACS, and all letters, on all levels, including El Badibir, come from them. And again, if I'm going to translate Machshava as I'm suggesting, that Machshava over here doesn't mean thought which is higher than speech. It means the most theoretical idea of ACS, which is the source of all actual madregas of ACS. So Yisrael all of Machshava means Ayenesh and Machshava means ACS and Atzilus. And that's the source of all ACS as they manifest, all the madregas, like it says in the Nat, Tainer, Gratzen, Chachma, Bina, Midas, Machshava, Dibur, Maise. Every kind of ace comes from that original machshava. A person cannot speak. He shouldn't think first. If you speak without thinking, it's meshuga. It's lacking wisdom and intuitiveness. So yidna machshava. And again, even if you mean that machshava is only one madrega higher than dibur, that still makes yidn before creation. But if you're learning like I'm suggesting, that it means al yenesh ad machshava, it means yidn are higher than everything. Nimtza, it means Yisrael and the Kaim Reishis, Yidn called Reishis, Hem Shadish called Elmas and Malachim. Shen is Galo, Idea, Dibur, the root of the whole creation, both Malachim and Nishamis and worlds, which come through Dibur. And nothing happens until the Yid moves, because the Yid is the beginning of everything. In other words, Rabbi say, earlier we were speaking how Nishamis are separate, and now we're speaking of Nishamis are Pnimius, that in their state of separateness, they're really representative of Elakus, until Machshava, until Al Yenesh have a Machshava. Which is why 3 lines from the bottom of page Tzad Gimel Ein HaMalachim Echeil M'Haitzi Shum Dibur. A Malach can't speak a single word, B'li Yisrael, without a Yid speaking first, because they're Shadish Kul, they're the root of everything. Kiheim Iker HaMachshava, they're the primary thought source of everything, because they are the thought. So although Neshamis, Reiva Neshamis, are in the Madrege of Pirud, Reiva Neshamis are the Madrege of Levushin Tekin Aslein, my Parchan Nishmas and Livnei Nosha. Most Neshamas are Madrega of Yisrael is Kashroin Be'eraisa. We need to take the Tכלית to Hashem. But those same Neshamas, Bepnimius, are higher than everything. Nimtza, turns out, Ki Kashe Yisrael Maschilim Leimer Shira, only when a Yid sings first, Yesh Lahem Malachem, turn to page Tzadik Dal, then it becomes possible for the angels, Leimer Gamkin Shira, to say Shira. V'zeh Shekosov Shira Shirim. And that's the pshat that a Yid song is called a song of all songs. It's in Alema, this means that Shir Shayisal, the song of the Jewish people, is Gedim Shirim Harbe Shalal Yenim, the many songs that the Malachim and the other entities on high sing as a symptom of the song that Yidden sing. And through the pnimiyas ashpan the chitzenis is malachim and chitzenis is ilma. So the point is to bring Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis. So on the one hand, Neshamas Yisrael are a part of the Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis, and on the other hand, the Neshamas Yisrael are the facilitators of Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis. And it makes sense. You have to have both. They have to be a part of the Tachtenim, but they have to be that entity within the Tachtenim that are in a position to make a keli to be Mamshech the Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis. So in short, what we learned in this shiur is that once we know, as we discussed in the first shiur at great length, that Atzilus and Ein Sof is not Lamata Adin Tachlis. Bria is, we say that the first step, the first station in Lamata Adin Tachlis is Neshamas Yisrael. A, because they're part of the Lamata Adin Tachlis, and B, because they're the pnimius of Lamata Adin Tachlis, and they do the avodah to bring the Elokus to the Lamata Adin Tachlis. Beginning of Perek. Now I'm going to make a comment to the Bachar HaZetzer. If I was making this hanacha, I would not make Sif Hey here. I would continue Sif Dalid to the entire next small paragraph and the first 3 lines of the paragraph after that. The paragraph that begins with Amlam, the third line says, V'neisif lazeh yeshna gam hamshacha se'er be'efen she'yirida lamata yezeh. I'd put the Hey there. And these next 8 lines or so, I would put at the end of Perek Dalid, because it's continuation. Vezahu, and this is already the beginning of the Inyan, only the beginning, but already the beginning of Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis, godliness descends below, beyond an end. The Koi, this is the reference to Agilui, Vayispachus, as the Mamer began. Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis means that godliness is revealed so low, that it's Hispashtus. And Gilui, Bebechinas Ein Sof, the Ein Sof in its Ein Sofius, is in a state of Hispashtus and Gilui Lamata, Ad Lamata Mata, to the lowest levels. B'madrigas Yecirat is the very last levels. Vayes Tachten is the very lowest levels. Hainu Elam is Bia, all 3 worlds. Bria, Yetira, Asi'ah, Shem, Bechinas Mata. Okamavu, as we discussed earlier in the Mamer. Ba'akitzer, in the summation of Teres, Abasham, which is in the Kuta Teres, Shebegim Lapashis, the Ditla, Salman, or Bia. And Bia means Elam is the Klolos, Ak, Atzilus, and Bia. So Ak and Atzilus is Dvekas and Kiruv. And Dafka Bia, Hine Ben Yeh, Elam is Bia, regarding the 3 lower worlds, Bria, Yetira, and Asi'ah, it says Afasis, Af Hifsik, to indicate that Bia, they put the Bia is separate from Atzilus. And the beginning of the separation of Atzilus and Ein Sof from Bria is Neshamas. Neshamas on the one hand, they're separate, and on the other hand, they're the facilitators of bringing Ein Sof to Lamata Adin Tachlis. Amnam, it's true that Inyan Zeh, this idea is Leidak Benegel Elamas and Malachim. Not just Elamas and Malachim, but Afilu Benegel and Neshamas. The Chiddush is that even Neshamas are part of Lamata Adin Tachlis. It is only the Hainu Reva Neshamas. It's only most of them. There are some of them that are above this, but as you will, if you will, Teir al Areif to Daber, Shehem Neshamas de Bia. Shegam Heim, Ukivin Neshamas Yisrael, Nichlolim Ba'inyonim. They're included in the ideas, Shaboyim, that follow Achrei Hefik, the Afasisiv, Asisiv, which goes on close, Elam is Bia, are separated from Atzilus and Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis has to be the revealing of godliness in these 3 worlds, which begins in Neshamas. Now this shiur is under an hour. I can see the number. And this shiur is by far the shortest in this Maimon. The next shiur is going to be on 5, and the rest of Tzadik Daled, all of Tzadik Hey, all of Tzadik Vav, and Tzadik Zayin, Tzadik Ches, and Tzadik Tes, in the beginning of Reish. And the next shiur is where we go dark, you understand? That Elam, Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis is not only to Neshamas, it's the Klippas, and the world's kinds of Klippas. But this Maimon is not going to circle back to how the godliness is revealed. He's simply going to present us with how dark it gets. As I told you in my introduction to the first class, that this Maimon ends a little bit dark. Because the Gilui of Ein Sof Lamata Adin Tachlis, as it's understood in Elamis, which are lower than Neshamas, is not going to be explained until Perek Yudalet, which is next year's Maimon. Now I gave 2 classes in the same day. It's very hard to give 2 classes on the same day, and both of them should be full tkifas. So I think I taught this correctly, but I taught it too fast, with not enough chayas and lebedekait, for which I apologize. I still pray and hope that it was still worthwhile. And b'lineda after Shabbos, Hashem will give me a couple of minutes. I'll prepare and record the last class, a good Shabbos and Besudas Tevis. We want Mashiach now.